So yesterday we saw Jeff talk about a whole bunch of amazing new things you're going to be able to do in SharePoint, and then we ended the day with Mr. Handelman talking to us about how infrastructure has now just become a slider, and JavaScript is the new operating system, and all these amazing things that you can do in the cloud. My job is to follow that up with how you can achieve all those amazing things they did yesterday and not get sacked. Right? Like that's essentially my job is to talk to you about a whole bunch of best practices for how to take advantage of the world of cloud and devices, but do so in a way that's compliant and secure. I'm excited to get the opportunity today. I've got a presentation which has a ton of demos in it. In fact, we're going to walk through 8 different sets of kind of mini scenarios and demos. All of these I'm doing without a parachute. They are live demos, so keep all your fingers and toes crossed for me that we can make it through all of this. But before I start with those, I want to start with a story to kind of illustrate the world that we came from and the world that we're going to. And like all good stories, it starts once upon a time. Now, we're talking about a long, long time ago. Actually, no, we're talking about maybe 10 years ago, really. We're talking about what was the world of security like 10 years ago, and and how do we need to change? So most enterprises, if you think about it, 10 years ago, essentially had just about the same strategy. You had a few really important applications that you were running on-premise. Maybe that was your ERP app or your CRM app, and you kind of treated these like a castle. Maybe you had a SharePoint tower and an Exchange tower in here as well. But essentially, these were kind of the fortress. And then you had your employees, and you had their tools and their resources, and maybe you had a defender or two, right? And you wrapped all of these in a big wall, right? And that wall was usually made up of Cisco boxes or Palo Alto boxes, and you stacked them super high, and you plugged wires into them, and you felt like you were pretty secure because everything inside that wall you could trust, and everything that you didn't trust was outside that wall. And hey, that was, 10 years ago, that was pretty much state of the art. But then some problems started happening. The first is you had partners who you wanted to do business with. And there weren't a lot of great ways to interact with them. Obviously, there's always been email, maybe the one universal communication mechanism that's always worked. But it is a little bit like sending a raven. It's not very interactive. I can't really run great business processes off of email. Maybe you were also using something like EDI with certificate-based authentication, right? This works well. It works at scale, but it has this problem of I continually need to be able to roll my certificates. So at Microsoft, we use EDI and certs for running our entire supply chain. So when all the parts for a Surface get ordered, or all of the various servers that need to run in an Azure data center get ordered, that's all done over EDI. And it works well, except every 2 years we need to roll the certs. Right? And that 2-month period when we roll the certs, something is going to go wrong. You never know which cert where or which partner is not going to be able to roll correctly, but we essentially have to keep 2 extra months of inventory around, right? Just for that once every 2 years that we're going to go through and roll all the certs. What a nightmare. Right? In fact, our team at Microsoft who runs that solution told us if you could just solve that one problem for us, you could probably save the company somewhere between $10 to $20 million a year every single year. Then some of you who were really bold, maybe you tried federation and web services as a way to interact with your partners. This was a road that seemed really cool, but it turns out it was much more rocky and in and out, and most of us never really got it to work. So again, just a problem that we just didn't really have a good solution for. And then finally, you always had emissaries. Maybe you called these salespeople or partner managers or somebody like that. You had an emissary who you sent out on the road, and you extended a bridge out with them, essentially your VPN. Right? And you treated them like they were just inside that big DMZ and firewall. And of course, we know that this is problematic as well. That VPN endpoint, it turns out, is the #1 way hackers like to get into your enterprise. Compromise an account. In fact, we know that 81% or more of compromised enterprises attacks, successful enterprise attacks, happen when there's a compromised account and then the hacker goes immediately for your VPN. Once they're in your VPN, because of this model of trusting everything inside the wall, they can get to everything, right? So it really just not a model that works anymore. But it's gotten even worse because now all of a sudden you have a whole bunch of different requirements. You have lots of people, you have customers, you have partners, you have employees who expect to be able to interact with your business from outside of that wall. And you have resources, you have files and data that you'd like to be able to access that are outside that wall as well. And now there are all these new cool castles in the cloud that you want to take advantage of. You want to take advantage of Office 365 and Salesforce and ServiceNow and maybe Workplace by Facebook. And you want to use some BI and machine learning in Azure or AWS or something like that, right? So you've got all of these cloud resources out there that you want to be able to take advantage of. And this model of the firewall and routing everything back through your corporate network just doesn't work anymore. So we need a new security model for this new paradigm. Now, why do we need a new model? Let's just reflect back on the world that we designed the previous security model for, first of all, right? We generally could assume that most of the users were going to be employees. We could assume that they were pretty much on PCs, maybe they were on tightly managed devices that you gave them of some other type, but largely they were on devices that were inside your corporation. Someone came to work and sat at a desk and did work, right? So you had pretty tight control. Most of the applications were on premise. You didn't have to worry too much. Maybe you had a colo somewhere, but probably not. And then your corporate network and your firewall really kind of represented that boundary that made you feel secure. And you were doing some maybe local packet tracking and logs, but the volume of these wasn't that high, right? It was something that humans with the right set of tools could keep up with. The new world is completely different, and that's why we need a new set of paradigms. In the new world, you want to be able to connect directly with your employees, your partners, and your customers. In fact, you will probably find, we certainly find this at Microsoft, that there are more partners and more customers to interact with than there are employees. So the old model doesn't work for that reason. The second is it's a world where you really want to be able to support people bringing their own device, whether that's your employees maybe, but certainly for your partners and your customers, you don't want to be in the business of managing their devices. That'd be crazy. We have an explosion of cloud applications. You want to take advantage of all those. In fact, most of the interesting innovation going on in the world and the new kind of competitive advantages from these cloud services and cloud applications like we were talking about yesterday. Obviously, we're now in a perimeterless world that all those Cisco boxes and Palo Alto boxes aren't really helping you very much in this world. And then, of course, there's a giant explosion of signal. Between the explosion of attackers and the volume of attacks continually to increase, but also just the number of services and the amount of signal being emitted, humans can no longer keep up without some kind of assistance. You just need something else to help you. So this new world, we believe, requires a whole new set of security principles. And I want to propose that these are the three. The first is that we shouldn't really trust anything anymore. Whether it's inside your corporate network or outside your corporate network, you always want to verify. Should I trust this person? Should I trust this device? Should I trust this piece of software before you let it do anything? In fact, at Microsoft, we are now in the process of moving our entire corporate network to be untrusted. And all of our PCs, all of our humans, all of our software will have to prove who it is and what it is, and it is in a good shape before it's able to get to any resource, even an on-premise resource. The second thing we always want to do is we want to use least privilege access principles, right? So don't give anybody access to something they don't need to get their job done or to complete the workflow that you want them to complete, and try to give them that access for the limited time that they need it. You've probably already thought about this some for your administrative accounts, but I want to propose that we can even use this for all of the different users, employees, partners, and customers who we need to interact with, and I'll show you some of that today. And then the last one is, look, we have to always assume that you're going to be breached. We know from ourselves and we know from all of our customers that we've worked with that, look, there's only two kinds of corporate networks in the world. There are corporate networks that have been breached and you know it. And then there are corporate networks that have been breached and you just don't know it yet, right? There are no other kinds of corporate networks. Everybody has been breached somehow. And so we just have to always assume and use that mentality of let's assume a breach, have all of the right kinds of equipment in place to monitor what's going on and be able to react. All of these three together we think of as the principles for a zero trust security model. And really, this is what I would propose to you is the modern way of thinking about security. Rather than having a different security system inside my corporate firewall than from outside, let's just treat everything like it's coming from the internet, that we don't trust it, and that we want to be super secure and force things to always follow these principles. And that way we can be consistent everywhere rather than kind of kidding ourselves that maybe we have security in places that we don't. So what I want to do today is walk through each of these principles and show you some demos of how they can be implemented today. That'll give you, I think, some great ideas maybe for how you can improve your security stance right away. So let's talk about verify explicitly. Verify explicitly is probably the easiest one to get our heads around. The first thing that we want to verify is we always want to know, who is this user? Right? Like, what are they trying to do, and what are the things that we need to know about them, right? So we need to know things, for instance, like the attributes of the user. We need to know their groups and their roles. We want to know where they're coming from and where they typically come from versus the location they're currently coming from. What privileges should we give them? All those kinds of static, not very frequently changing attributes we want to use. But in addition, we always want to have some kind of system that tells us, because there's just too much data to keep up, what's the risk of this person? Are they doing unusual, risky things that we should be aware of? And what's the risk of this particular session? Right? So all of these things we want to be able to check first before we let anybody in. So let's go ahead and take a look at a really simple demo of that using Azure AD Identity Protection. So, get my machine going. All right, there we go. So for all of these demos I'm going to show you today, I'm going to show them to you in two different browsers. One browser is always going to be the administrator view, and then the second browser, which I'm using Firefox for, is going to be the end user view. So now I'm looking at the administrator view here. Let me show you a few policies that I've set up as part of making sure I'm protected and I'm verifying all those identities the way I want to. So first, this is my identity protection user risk policy. What I've done here is I've set up a policy that whenever my user risk goes to high, so a high-risk user is somebody who we know their account has been compromised. Maybe the system has even found their username and password in a dark website or something like that, right? We know that they've been compromised. And so anytime a user goes to high risk, I want to take action on that and immediately remediate. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to require them to go in and change their password, and I'm going to, and obviously to do that, they'll have to do a multi-factor authentication. Right? So this gives me a way to automate the process of cleaning up an account and kicking out the bad guy without my security operations team having to go in and take manual steps. So that's pretty nice. The next thing I'm going to look at here is my sign-in risk policy. So then my sign-in risk policy, anytime I see a sign-in risk, so that's that specific session. So this user is signing in right now. What am I seeing? If my machine learning system tells me that the risk is medium or above, I want to force that user to go in and do a multi-factor authentication. And so you can see here what I'm going to do is I'm going to allow access and I'm going to require multi-factor authentication for them to get into the system. So let's go ahead and take a look at what that looks like for one user. So I'm going to go to Teams. I'm trying to go to Teams as Clara here. So I'm going to log in as Clara. And, oh, actually, you know what? I should show you one more thing first before I do that. Sorry about that. Let's go back to the admin view. I actually want to show you Clara so you can see that she is a compromised user. So here's Clara. Now, the data on Clara here is a little messed up because I've been practicing my demo. But what you'll see, this is all the data about Clara. She's been marked as high risk by the system, and there's a whole bunch of detections here. Now, many of these detections are me practicing the demo, but you can see down here that a few days ago, we found Clara's credentials leaked somewhere. And so what we want to do is take an automated action to remediate that, and I'll show you how that works. So we've got a compromised user. It's Clara. When Clara goes to sign in, let me make sure I type that right. Oh yeah, the great thing about watching a identity demo is you get to see lots of signing in and signing out. So exciting. Try that again. Here we go. So first of all, Clara's account is at risk, right? So first thing I'm going to have to do is I'm going to have to verify that I really am Clara, and I'm going to do that using my phone. right? So I'm going to verify. That's going to send a request to my authenticator app. And then on my phone over here, I'm just going to approve that request. And that'll get me into the system so I can now change my password. Here we go. So I'm going to put in a new password here. Hopefully I got those right. Let's see. There we go. So now I've been automatically mitigated, right? Now the bad guys have been kicked out. I've proved who I am, and I can just go ahead and get into Teams and get started. Now that's pretty nice. Now, but let's take a look at another thing there. Remember we talked about, so that's the automated user policy in place. But let's say we want to look at the session risk as well. So here I'm going to bring up a Tor browser. Now, you probably don't want people using a Tor browser at work. I don't know of any good reason to do this. That's probably a hacker. So while the Tor browser comes up, right, we want to be able to make sure that we can block anybody who's coming from an anonymous Tor site, for instance. So here I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to go try to log into the Azure portal as Clara. And you're going to see what happens is that even though I've got the right password, and I can do a multi-factor authentication, I'm going to get blocked because the system detects, hey, hold on, you are not who we thought you should be. Okay, here we go. And so I've put the right password in. But the system has detected that there's something really strange going on, and it's going to keep me from getting in. Right, so this is a really nice way to make sure that using session risk, we're evaluating every single attempt to log in and keeping those bad guys out. Hey guys, can we go back to the slide deck, please? Now, what did we just see there? So the first thing we saw was Azure AD Identity Protection. That's our machine learning system that is always evaluating all of the user risk accumulated over time and session risk. This looks at about 170 gigabytes of data a day that's coming in from all across Microsoft and helping us do things like train our algorithms, which then a whole bunch of security experts go in every night and tag all of the data and make sure that we have really clean algorithms the next day. So every 24 hours, we're evolving a new set of algorithms. We have a whole bunch of global threat intelligence that feeds into this. But really the important part is that I can take all of that interesting machine learning power, I can detect things that might be risky, and I can automatically mitigate them without having to overwhelm my SOC. So this is a really great way to be able to make sure you're staying up with the threats in the modern world of high volume. In addition, we also saw Azure AD Password Protection. So that's a system that is monitoring for leaked credentials. You know, when someone reuses their username and password, maybe someplace that they shouldn't, it turns up in a paste bin or something like that. The password protection system automatically flags them, forces them to go through and change their password. But even better, behind the scenes here, we've got a list now that we maintain of the 2,000 most commonly used passwords. We take those and we do all of the character replacement. So password actually might be P at $W0RD exclamation point. Right? So we take and do all of those character replacements for all the common passwords. We end up with a list of about 1 million passwords overall that are just too easy to guess because we see them frequently used by hackers. In addition, you can add your own custom banned passwords to this list as well. So if there are brands for your company that you think would be common for hackers to use, you can put those in. And then every time somebody tries to authenticate and change their password, if they've guessed something that is too easy, we come up and prompt them, hey, pick something that's harder to guess. This is a really fast way to quickly diversify your password base and get yourself out of the common attack space into a space that's much less likely to be tried. But it still has this problem of, you know what? We're using passwords. You know, and the only people who like passwords are people like this. Right? Because, look, you as a user, you don't like passwords. Typing them in, remembering all those different passwords, that's a pain in the butt. Particularly on a mobile device, oh my gosh, you're going to see in a minute as I struggle to put in a password on a mobile device. That's a terrible experience as well. So we really need something better than passwords. And particularly we know that passwords are problematic because this is the number one way enterprises get compromised, is a set of stolen credentials. Like I was telling you, 81% or more of successful attacks start with a compromised password. So what do? There's got to be a better way. You know, today, you think about passwords, they're not really easy to use, they're not terrible, we've all learned, but they're very low security, right? And then we added on all these things. We've added on multi-factor authentication and smart keys and text messages and all that. And those certainly are much better security, but they're kind of inconvenient, right? We need a better thing that lets us get strong authentication in a way that's easy for the user to use. Luckily, we have that. We've been investing now for almost 5 years in an open standards-based effort between us and Google and PayPal and Bank of America and hundreds of other companies to develop the FIDO2 set of standards, which give us an open standards-based cross-platform way to be able to do strong authentication in a very user-friendly manner. And the good news is that this is widely available today. In fact, all of the major browsers now at least have it in a beta form, and Windows and Android have both been certified to be FIDO2 compatible. In fact, between our different forms of passwordless authentication we support at Microsoft, that's Windows Hello is our premier version. The Authenticator app, which if you're not using the Authenticator app to do passwordless authentication, you really should think about it, particularly for your Microsoft account. It's a great way to be able to authenticate without using your password. But we'll also support for things like YubiKeys and the hundreds of other new kinds of FIDO2 tokens that are now available. This gives us a really great way to go to a world where increasingly you no longer need to use a username and password. You can just enter it. In fact, last month we had over 100 million users who were already passwordless. I'm hoping given another 18 months or so we can get this number up closer to 1 billion. But 100 million is doing pretty well. We're happy with that as progress. So let's go ahead and take a look. If you haven't seen this, I'd love to show you. Let's take a look at what that will look like. First of all, I need to go in and show you, actually I don't have to show you any admin stuff at all here. So let's go ahead, I'm gonna log in using 2 different accounts here just to demonstrate. The first one, let me sign out of Clara. I'm gonna try to log into Teams again as a different user. This time I'm gonna log in as Beatrice, and the reason I'm using Beatrice is because she's set up for passwordless with the phone app. This is a really awesome way to authenticate. All I have to do is come over to my phone. I've got a message that's coming from the backend service. In theory, let's see if it's working. Oh, here we go. So I've just clicked on my phone now. I've used my finger and authenticated, and then this should just connect me on the front end here. I did approve it, I swear. Oh, come on. Well, I told you I was going live. Let's try that. Let's refresh that and see what happens. Oh, the request timed out. Let's try one more time. Sorry about, I don't want to do a password. Is there a way for me to not do that? Oh, shoot. Okay. Well, there you go. Live demos, that's always the problem. Let's close the browser. We'll try again. The team warned me that I was being too bold here. No, now it's kicked me out. Okay, well, let's forget that. Let's show the other one, though, instead. So now I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to use my even cooler form. So here, I've got a couple of YubiKeys. These are FIDO2 compatible keys, and I'm going to use those to be able to log in on my Windows Surface here. So I'm going to go ahead and stick in my this Windows key. I'm going to go ahead and log in, and this, I think, is really the coolest way to do passwordless. So all I have to do here is unlock the key. I'm going to touch the key to prove that I'm actually here, and I'm automatically logged in as the user on that key, who happens to be Bruna. So you can see up there, with just that simple gesture, I was able to securely log in as Bruna, all from the key. And because that key only has one identity on it, this whole process of logging in is super clean and smooth. So that's, I think, really our premier way of being able to log in in a passwordless manner. And it's particularly nice if you're an administrator because I can have a key with many identities on it. I'll show you that in a second, and be able to quickly switch between them. So let's go ahead and switch back to the slide deck, guys. Okay, so I'm sorry the first part of that failed. I'm glad the second part worked. The passwordless factors, though, are widely used, and particularly if you're in like I used it this week in a hotel, right? So I wanted to go to the business center and print out my demo script. I could go in, just put my username in and accept on my phone, and that's a really nice way to be able to use something like a kiosk without having to worry about your credentials getting taken. So we've now talked about the user identities, but the next piece we always want to verify is the device itself. What kind of state is this device in? Is it managed by my company, or is it a bring your own device? What's the health and compliance state of that device? Like, for instance, what's Microsoft Defender saying about it from an antivirus standpoint? Do I have any unusual applications installed we should be worried about? What type of device is it, and what's the OS version? We see this a lot. For instance, maybe the version of iOS has a bug in it, and you want to force people to update to a new version before they can access anything. And of course, you want to be able to check the encryption status, because I don't want my business critical data to go to a device that's not encrypted. So to start with, let's just take a look at a really quick demo here. The way the services are set up, the way Azure AD is set up to work with Intune, makes it really easy. Which one is this? This is 3. Let's hope this comes up. Come on. Here we go. So I'm demoing now from I can't get anything to come up here. You gotta love that. I swear this all worked in rehearsal this morning, first thing. 2, there's 2. And then I need 3. No. I need 3. You got it. Okay, cool. That's why you don't let vice presidents demo. So here I've got a kind of an older iPhone. It's a little out of date. I haven't gotten it managed. And so if I try to log in as Dominique here, let me just be crazy. Here we go. You can see that my device is not enrolled. Right? So this is going to now walk me. The Azure AD has figured out by looking at the certificate on this device that, it's registered, but it's not enrolled. I need to go through the process of getting this into Intune and enrolling it. And so I can go ahead and do that if I want. That's a really super nice way to be able to easily get a device managed and working. But let's go ahead and take a look at a device that is managed. What am I doing wrong here? There we go. Need that one. There we go. It's up. Okay, so then this is a device that is managed. And if I log in as Dominique on this one, you'll see, again, like I said, the joy of typing in a password on a little tiny phone screen. And of course, I entered the wrong one. Let's see if I got it right that time. No. Now that you guys have all seen it multiple times, you'll be able to go home and log in as me on your device. There we go. So then this device is already enrolled, right? So I can go ahead, I can get signed in, and I can go right into the Azure portal and do the work that I wanted to do. So this is a really nice way to start enforcing that, hey, I only want that kind of zero trust model of devices that I trust in a good state to be able to access my data. I always want to be able to encrypt my data, and that way I know if a device gets lost or an employee leaves the company, I can always wipe it remotely as well. This is another really good way to get a zero trust model in place. Hey guys, let's go back to the slides again. Okay, so we've talked now about verify explicitly. That's really about verifying the user and all their attributes. That's about verifying the device. I didn't show you a couple of really cool things we can do. For instance, you can use Microsoft Defender to be able to give you the antivirus state of a device and see if it's malware clean before you let it in. You can also use things like Lookout and our other partners who give you a rating for an iOS or an Android device as part of informing that. So it gives you a whole bunch of context about the device as well as the user. Now let's talk about using least privilege access. So least privilege access, what we want to do is really constrain the things that people can get to only what they need to in the appropriate situation to get work done. But before we can do that, we got to connect a whole bunch of resources up to our policy engine, right? So obviously, we already have lots of great connections to the Microsoft cloud, but you might be surprised to know that, in fact, we have thousands and thousands of connections, in fact, almost 1 million, I'll show you, to other cloud services as well. And then we have lots of ways to connect up your on-premise applications. So you really can connect all of your resources up. In fact, last month, we had 1.4 million non-Microsoft applications that authenticated users using Azure Active Directory. That's up over 100% year over year. And you'd probably be surprised to know that last month, 46 million, almost 47 million people authenticated using Azure AD and went out to one of these other services. In fact, it's not unusual for us to send millions of users a month out to something like ServiceNow or Google Apps or Workday. People really like to use Azure AD as a way to secure their entire infrastructure, not just the Microsoft cloud infrastructure. And I think a lot of people probably aren't even aware that you can do this. It's a really nice benefit of the service. In addition, last month at Ignite, though, we announced our secure hybrid access partnerships. This is a way that using either the Azure AD app proxy or partners infrastructure like Akamai, Citrix, F5, or Zscaler to be able to provide access management for on-premise applications or for applications that you have lifted and shifted into the cloud that maybe don't have good standards-based authentication support. So it's a really nice way to be able to bring your on-premise apps to hook up to Azure AD so you can get all of your apps hooked up as we go toward this world of least privilege. Then let's go ahead and take a look now. If I've hooked all my apps up, now I want to let people get into them, but I want to be careful about what they can do. So here I'm going to look at, let's say I've got a user who's using a home PC. What I want to do is make sure that I've got the right set of conditions in place that they can get to a few least privilege, a few apps that I'm not really worried about, but I don't want them to be able to use kind of sensitive data or things like that. So here I've got a thing in place that's a conditional access policy in place. You're going to understand this one pretty quick. So I've got an app I've included in here. This is SharePoint because we put a lot of sensitive data in SharePoint, obviously. And I've got a condition in here, which is that my device, any device state has to be in there, except if it's marked as compliant. So I'm going to block the ability to download from everything that's not marked as compliant. That's why I've excluded compliant here. And then I'm going to use a custom control here. So we call this conditional access app control. And you can see right here, I'm going to block downloads using that. So this is a really great new integration between us and SharePoint, between Azure AD and SharePoint that you're going to see here. So now let's go ahead, now that you've seen those, I'm going to go and log into a bunch of stuff. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to log in as Anna. I need to switch to my other YubiKey. So here you're going to see a YubiKey with a ton of identities on it. This is really cool if you're an administrator. So you can see here I've got a ton of different identities. This is a great way to be able to keep separate accounts that I want to use for different purposes. So here I'm going to log in as Anna this time. Oh, that's not good. Let's try again. It's another one of these. I swear that everything worked in the practice round. Anna. There we go. So let's first of all go to My Apps. The My Apps is just the launcher so I can find all these things. Now, okay, so as a corporate policy, so as a company, we use a bunch of different things in this demo. So first of all, let's just take a look at Workplace by Facebook. Workplace by Facebook we don't consider particularly important. So on this unmanaged device, I can just go ahead for, maybe it's my home PC. I can just go ahead, click on Workplace for Facebook and get in and, do whatever people do on Workplace for Facebook. But SharePoint, right, is more important to me. SharePoint we store some pretty important documents on. So I'm going to go ahead and log into SharePoint, but you can see here the CASB, Microsoft Cloud App Security, is now monitoring my use of SharePoint, and it's warning me about the fact that it's being monitored, which is kind of nice. But the rule that we've just put in place is that download rule that's going to prevent me from being able to download a document to my home PC. Now this is great because I can go in and I can read documents, I can do things like that, but the minute I try to save them locally, I'm going to get blocked. So you'll see here, I'm going to go in and try to get this document. I'm going to try to download it, and the CASB is going to stop me. Oh, hold on, I don't want highlights. I want to try to download that document. And Microsoft Cloud App Security there has blocked me from being able to download it because it has sensed that my device is unmanaged and not compliant, and so we don't want to be able to download anything here. So that's pretty cool. And then I put there's another rule I didn't show you in here. Let's look at the other rule. So I'm back to my admin console now. This one is a rule for Salesforce. Now Salesforce we consider super sensitive data because that's where all of our customer data is. I've got one condition here, which is, look, all devices that aren't, same condition, all devices that aren't compliant, and I'm just going to block access, right? So you can't get in if your device isn't compliant. So now back again to being Anna in this view. If I try to go to Salesforce and log in here, you'll see that Azure AD catches me. Oh, you're not on a compliant device. You just can't get to that resource at all. Right? So a really nice way to be able to manage different levels of access appropriately and get somebody into a least privileged state without having to do extra work, all based on the fact that they're on their home PC. So I'm going to close all these and log out. And then, hey, can we go back to the slide deck again? Now let's take this to another level, right? So the next piece of a least privileged approach is to get people into only a small number of applications and make sure that they can get to the things just that they need. Identity governance is a brand new solution that we just GA'd at Ignite this year. What it lets you do is design what we call an application access package. So that's a combination of apps that are specifically tailored to a person in a given role. The users automatically get provisioned into those applications. You can set up things like periodic access reviews, and then when they change roles or leave the company, their access can be automatically withdrawn, or at the end of their project or something like that, they can be withdrawn. This is a really great way to kind of tidy up and make sure that everybody has a very small set of applications and they can't get to anything that they shouldn't get to. So let me go ahead and show you how this works with some of our new first-line worker capabilities. Now, a first-line worker in our world is somebody who probably works on a store floor, maybe, or they work in a warehouse or something like that. Like it's somebody who's not a frequent technology user. And I want to show you some of the rules I've put in place. So the first thing we're going to do is go ahead and take a look at the access packages we've created for retail store workers. Here I am back in the Azure portal as Wes, the administrator. You can see I've got one access package that I've built here. This access package is specifically targeted at this set of users. I can give them a link so they can quickly sign in. But here's the different sets of apps and roles that they're going to get. And you can see it's a very constrained set. They're going to get Salesforce, they're going to get ServiceNow, they're going to get access to an Office 365 group and team, they're going to get access to a SharePoint site, and they're going to get access to Dropbox, and that's it. Right? Like I'm not giving them access to all of my corporate apps, just to those targeted ones that they need. So now if I'm, let's see, I'm now going to, okay, so now we're going to switch devices again. Which one is this? That must be 4. I must be just the dumbest demoer in the world. Hey guys, how come this button's not going? I got to get to 4. And it's on. No? Someone with really bad luck walked into the auditorium right before we started this, I guess. Nothing, huh? Our switcher box hates us. Oh, there we go. Now we got it. Okay. Okay, so we'll see how, oh, and it's not up on the top though. Can I do take on that? There it is. Okay. Hey, I'm going to keep trying here. Okay, so now I'm a new employee, Atlas. Right? So Atlas is a store employee. He does not have a username and password because what we've learned is that store employees don't sign in very frequently. They tend to forget them. They tend to forget their usernames and passwords. Instead, they'd much rather just use their phone number. So you can see here's Atlas's phone number. I'm going to go ahead and type that in, and log in using that. And all I'm going to get is a code over here on my phone. I'm going to enter the code. This is kind of, sort of like what you would expect from WhatsApp or something like that. That's a one-time code. It's good for about 10 minutes. I can go ahead and use that to sign in. And then you can see I can actually, since Atlas works in a bunch of different places, he might need multiple accounts tied to that phone number. And I'm going to go ahead now as Atlas, and I'm going to go, I'm starting up at a new job. I need access to a set of resources at that job. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to come in and I'm going to request access to that retail store employee pack that we were looking at. I'm going to click here, request my access, starting new job. And submit that. Okay, so that request has now been submitted out. You can see, obviously, I've been practicing my demo a lot. There it is. Now, let's go ahead and take a look at the experience for approving that. So if I'm the manager, I'm going to come over here, and I'm going to log in and go approve that access. So Hina's the manager. So you can see here as Hina now, here's all the approvals that have been sent, and I'm going to go ahead and approve this. Now this takes a minute to go in, but so this is super nice, really easily. Oh, you know what? I didn't even switch. You guys missed all of that, huh? Someone in the audience should be like, "Hey, jerk, we didn't see that." Okay, so hey, I apologize. So this was what I just did. Was I went in and I approved Atlas's request. So here's the screen that Hina gets. She can go in and approve that request. It's been approved now. And then it takes a minute or two here for all of the provisioning to happen in the background. And of course, it'll take me 3 minutes to get the machine to switch over to the right device. Again, it's, yep. Come help me there. This one, yeah. Yeah, go for it. Is it up? Yeah, okay, good. So now I'm Atlas again. I'm back on my iPad here. I'm going to click on and go into my apps. And hopefully by now it's had time to provision. Yeah, so you can see I've been provisioned into all the applications that I need access to. I can just go ahead and click on all of these and get to work. Now what's nice is, again, I've just got the few things that I'm eligible for. I don't have to go do a whole bunch, but I was able to get up and running in just a few minutes. So that's a really cool benefit while giving us the nice, least privilege approach. So let's go back to the slides, guys. So that's a way to get users in with a very small set of privileges. But what about someone who's like an administrator? Right? So administrator accounts are probably the scariest ones you have in your system because of this problem, right? Which is that if I have permanent administrators, over time, I am just slowly increasing the attack surface for a bad guy, right? Like there are all these accounts around, they all have high privileges, and over time, as I add more and more of those, my attack surface grows and grows and grows, and I become more at risk. What we'd really like is a model more like this, where people can only go in and do things for a very short amount of time. Those privileges then go away and get me back down to a safer baseline so my attack surface is minimized. You can do this using the Azure AD Privileged Identity Management Service. So I'm going to go back again, hopefully. Hey, that time it worked. Awesome. So let me show you, first of all, a conditional access policy here. Now, this is probably one of my favorite ones. It's really cool. We're going to limit the people who can go to a specific Power BI because this Power BI happens to have a bunch of data in it that I think is kind of important. I don't want people to be able to get to it. So I'm going to exclude, I'm going to block all users except for people who happen to have two specific roles. So if you're a global administrator or you're the security administrator, you're going to be able to get to that Power BI report. Everybody else is going to be blocked. You can see here, this is where I've put Power BI in, and then I've blocked access for everybody who wasn't in the exclude list. Right? So this is a really cool way to narrow down who can get to that specific Power BI report. So let's go ahead and try to get into Power BI. You'll see here that, which account am I using for this? I'm going to go in. Again, demonstrating just how cool it is to have all these accounts on your key. I'm going to go in as Adriana this time. And I don't have access to it, right? Like that, I'm blocked because I'm not in the right role. But if I go in then to the privileged identity system, I am actually eligible to go for this role. I just need to get into it. So let's go ahead and log in again. Like I told you, you're going to see a lot of logins in an identity demo. Go in as Adriana, and now I'm going to request that I get activated for that role. So you can see here, here's the roles that I'm eligible for. Security administrator, you'll remember that in the policy we saw earlier that a security administrator is allowed to get into that role, and I'm going to go ahead and activate this. Now, because I've already done a strong authentication, I don't need to do a new MFA here. It already knows who I am. And so now the PIM system is going through. It first of all looks at what I'm eligible for and checks that I really am who I say I am. Then it's going to go out and do all the provisioning into the correct roles and systems that I need to be in. Sometimes this can take a few seconds, a minute or two even. And then once I'm in, it's going to go through and make it so that I can actually get into that Power BI report that I couldn't get into before because now I have this role active. And we'll see how long this is going to take to happen. It appears the demo gremlins are out today. There we go. So step 2 is complete, and then there we go. So now, when I go back to Power BI and I try to sign in, you'll see that I'm able to just go straight into Power BI and get to work. So a really nice way, again, to be able to give a user access that they need and then have this automatically withdrawn in an hour after they've finished running those reports and get back to a minimal security footprint. All right, guys, let's go back to the slides again. Here we go. Okay, so I've showed you, we've talked about users and how to, and devices. We've talked about hooking up all your applications, but we want to get even finer grained than this, because in each of these applications, we have lots of different data and lots of different files and stuff that we want to be able to protect. How do we do that? Well, we're going to do that using Microsoft Information Protection. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to create a bunch of data labels and figure out how we want to classify things. We're going to define all of our data access policies, and then we're going to enable users to start labeling data. That's nice. You've seen that probably in the new sets of clients where I can automatically go in and label. But really, humans are not very good at labeling data, so we're also going to set up a bunch of automated rules. So for instance, if we see things like credit card numbers or account numbers or things like that, we'll know to automatically label those documents. And then finally, we'll apply encryption to all of those depending on the level of tag that I've put in. This all just happens using the Microsoft Information Protection System. It's a great way to do this. And then we can use Microsoft Cloud App Security, which is our CASB, to be able to monitor then the comings and goings of all of those labeled documents. So those labels aren't just good in the Microsoft Cloud anymore. Now we can use them all over the place. So let's go ahead and take a look at what this looks like when I'm using Microsoft Cloud App Security. There we go. Okay, so let's go back to the admin console again. You'll see here I've got another policy. This one is going to take all of my cloud app traffic. So I've got all my cloud apps here, and I'm going to redirect all of that traffic for every user out through the CASB, and I'm going to use session controls to do that. So here I'm using a custom policy in MCAS. So then let's go ahead and take a look at what that policy looks like in MCAS. In this particular case, our company uses both SharePoint and Dropbox, but we don't really trust Dropbox near as much as we trust SharePoint, right? Of course not. Let's go ahead and take a look at the policies here that I've got to help me deal with that. So inside of MCAS, I've got a session policy. This one is going to block the upload of any document that's been tagged as highly confidential to Dropbox. So here you can see my policy, any app that equals Dropbox, and any classification label that equals highly confidential, I'm going to block. I'm going to send email to the user to notify them that they've been blocked. I'm also going to send an alert to me, the admin, so that I know that that's happening. All right, so let's go ahead and we're going to log in. We're going to go back to my apps. This time I'm going to log in as Rosie, and Rosie is an account that is being monitored here. Okay, so let's go ahead and we're going to I'm going to go to Dropbox here. I don't know why anyone would ever do this, but hey, you could go to Dropbox. So I'm at Dropbox, and I get the warning, right? Oh, it's being monitored. So it tells me that MCAS is in place and doing its job. And I've got some documents over here on my desktop, you'll see. I've got this one, which is which has been marked as highly confidential, tagged that way, and then this one, which is just a general report. And so let's go ahead and try to upload these to Dropbox and see what happens. My general one, here's a folder I can use. Let's go into my folder. And then if I this is the general one, it's been tagged, and oh look, I can just upload that to Dropbox, that just works. But if I try to take the high one and over there, oh, awesome, the confidential document got blocked by MCAS. So it gives me a really nice way, even at a very granular level, to be able to monitor the usage of individual docs and where they're going. And of course, since we trust SharePoint, just to prove to you this isn't fake, we trust SharePoint. So when I go into SharePoint, I'll just be able to upload that document, because that's the place that we really want people to store their confidential docs, right? Let's go there. You can see here, I'm just going to drag that into SharePoint, and lo and behold, that's going to work. Well, in theory, that's going to work. That's some SharePoint thing I've never seen that before. Let's try one more time. There we go. Right, so that's using the conditional access policy plus the CASB to be able, and Microsoft Information Protection, to be able to do very, very fine-grained protection of content to make sure that my highly confidential information stays within my approved boundaries. All right, so hey guys, go back to the slides real quick. So now we've gone through these two principles, verify explicitly and use least privilege access. The last one is assume breach. This one is really simple to get your head around. We just got to keep in mind, look, there is no such thing as perfect security, right? Like, we're always going to continue to push hard and make sure that you have the most secure deployment possible. But there's always going to be a hacker who's out trying some new way that no one's thought of before to get into the system. So we have to assume that they will eventually be successful, and we need to be able to deal with that. So let's go ahead and take a look real quick at some services that we provide to help with that. So the first one is just Azure AD Identity Protection. Identity protection is great for automating the mitigation, but it's also great for being able to look at and detect when you've been compromised. So let's first of all look at the identity protection overview. You'll see here that clearly I am under attack. You can see I've got a lot more risky users all of a sudden, and I've got a lot of new risky sign-ins that have been detected. I can look at all my risky users, and I can go in here and I can start taking action right away. So Clara, who we saw before, she's at high risk, and I can go ahead and start taking action. But more interestingly, I can go in and see all of the data about what's been happening with Clara. So I can see all the information about her, I can see all of her risky sign-ins, I can see any detections or problems that she's had, and then I can see all of the risky behaviors that have added up over time to her being a risky user. So that's pretty cool and helps me. I can also see any risk detections that I've had as a company. So this combines all of the different risks that in my identity system. So I'm really getting a ton of data now to help me go in and investigate and figure out what's happening. But really what I want is I want to take all this data and I want to get it into my SIEM, right? So I can see across my whole infrastructure what's going on. Now, we have great APIs for that. If you use Splunk or something, you can do it. But obviously, for us, we think that the best SIEM is to use something like Azure Sentinel, which should be up here somewhere. Well, and then, so inside of Azure Sentinel, then I can go in. Where is it? No. So now all of my data is making its way into Azure Sentinel. Let's go ahead and take a look at this one here we've got set up. Now this is really cool. All of my events are making it in here. You can see here's all the identity events that we've been looking at. In fact, many of these are things that I just did. I can go in and have all of my log files here so I can start investigating right away. I've got a whole set of queries already set up that are going to enable me to quickly analyze. I can connect up all of my different sources. So it's not just Microsoft data that makes it into Sentinel. I can take data from Amazon, I can take data from Azure AD, I can take data from all kinds of places, from Cisco, from Checkpoint, from CyberArk. Pretty much everybody in the industry is enabled to pump data in here. But the most interesting part about Sentinel is now I can automate all of my responses. So not just the ability to go in and have my SecOps teams investigate. Oh, actually, why don't we investigate something too? That's actually a really cool capability of Sentinel. So here you can see this was the event we just had where I tried to upload a document that was marked as highly confidential. Let's go ahead and get into the investigation view in Sentinel. So you can see here, here's the block of the upload, here's the IP address, here's the account that I was demoing with, and I was trying to go to Dropbox. But let's go ahead and take a look and see if there's anybody else from that IP address that we need to worry about. So this is now going through and exploring all of the data for me. Oh, and I had no results on that one. Let's move this up so we can see better. Try that again. Here we go. So from this IP address, you can see there's a whole bunch of other accounts that have also been coming in. And so if I'm worried that that might be a hacker, this gives me a great way to start exploring and seeing which other accounts I might need to worry about. And then finally, at the end of this, after I've done all my investigations, I can use the playbooks in Sentinel to automate all of my responses. So here's a really nice playbook that we've created for responding to a high-risk set of sign-ins. And you can see here, using Logic Apps, we've just framed out all of the automation that's going to happen. It's going to send an email, it's going to post a message as the flow bot, and it's going to create a new job and a new record for me. This lets me go through and automate really easily all the steps I have in my automated response for security events, rather than leaving that to chance with humans. So let's go back then to the slides, guys. So we just saw Azure Sentinel there on the screen, right? Gives you really amazing cloud capabilities. All of your Office 365 and Azure data, plus data from anything else, can get into there. But I think the most interesting thing about Sentinel is the ability to automatically automate all of your incident responses so that you can respond very quickly and not have your SOC get overwhelmed with kind of manual mitigation or having to send off tickets or things like that. So now we've talked about all of the different principles of zero trust: verify explicitly, use least privilege access, and assumed breach. The one piece we haven't talked about is what's happening in that thing in the middle, the security and compliance policy engine. What is that magical thing? Well, it's actually the combination of data from all of these different services. So Azure AD, Azure ATP, Windows Defender ATP, Microsoft Intune, Microsoft Information Protection, the Cloud App Security Service, all provide data monitored by Azure Sentinel into the security and compliance policy engine. This is the Azure AD conditional access system. And in this system, you can go through and set all of your policies, whether they're security or compliance. Every time a user tries to access any piece of your content, they have to go through this system. We calculate the effective policy, we calculate the current user risk and session risk, and then have all kinds of automated controls you can use to mitigate or allow as needed. This lets you really get that awesome zero trust stance going, all in a highly automated way that lets your SOC actually focus just on the specific attacks that maybe they need to focus on rather than being overwhelmed. So those are our principles of zero trust. Thank you for your time today. If you walk away with anything, I would say, please turn on MFA if you haven't already. Right? We know that that will dramatically decrease your risk of attack. Right? Any single thing, in fact, you come away from the conference with, please go turn on MFA. Start thinking about your devices. If they aren't inventoried and registered, let's get those going. Moving your apps to Azure AD, that lets you use the conditional access system to get into this least privileged, highly monitored state. You want to think about how you're going to be classifying, labeling, and encrypting your documents and data. And then finally, the sooner you can start using risk as a factor in terms of your application management and access management, the better off you're going to be. Thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate it. Just a reminder that there is a Microsoft Ignite tour on the road coming in February if you're interested. And please rate me in the app. Thank you so much.